They say if you stand very still by the pond, the statues whisper. One voice laughs, one weeps. The third only says your name. You'll swear it's the wind in the trees, until you realise there's no wind at all. Auckland Domain pretends to sleep. By day, it's a harmless green hollow in the middle of the city. Sloping lawns, old oaks, joggers, prams. The museum shining on the ridge like a bone in sunlight. But when the traffic thins and the wind threads itself through the trees, the domain sheds its manners. The ground feels older. The air holds on to your breath a fraction too long. And down by the water, that's where the story lives. 3 figures, 3 women, 3 witches, some say, who never left. I've heard this legend since I was a child. Most Aucklanders have. It travels like a dare, the kind whispered in the back seat of a car, retold at flat parties just after midnight. Go to the domain. Walk the narrow road under the trees. Stop at the pond. Turn off your lights. Wait. If the moon is thin and the wind is mean, you'll see them, 3 silhouettes under the branches, swaying where no breeze should be. It isn't proof, only a suggestion. But in a place that already murmurs, suggestion is enough. Here's the part that sounds sensible, and it is. No one in New Zealand was ever executed for witchcraft. The fever that burned through Europe burned out long before this country learned the word for parliament. The bronze by the water, those 3 draped figures, are officially muses. Strength in the centre, flanked by wisdom and fertility. Someone meant them as a gift to the city. They didn't ask to be called witches. The plaque doesn't say it. The archives don't say it. But the mouth of the city does, and it has for decades. And the city's mouth is persuasive at night. There's a second version some of us heard, the one that scratches deeper. It says those 3 weren't witches at all, not in any European sense. It says they were wahine, practicing rongoa, healers, and frightened settlers put a new word on an old knowledge they didn't understand. It says that 3 ropes were tied to a tree near the swamp where the pond now gleams, and the work was done quickly, fearing daybreak. There are no names in this story, no dates, no trial to argue with. Only the shape, only the number, only the feeling that, in a place where water gathers, something unjust might keep gathering too. I wanted to be reasonable about all this. Truly. I read the careful articles. I looked at the dates. I walked down there in the daytime and touched the stone rim of the pool, feeling a little silly for expecting anything except ducks. What changed my mind wasn't a sight, not at first. It was the way the domain sounds when you go alone, late, and promise yourself you won't run. The domain is a bowl on a volcano's shoulder. Sound does strange things in bowls. A skateboard rattles somewhere and arrives everywhere. Someone laughs far off and you hear it too close, as if it started behind your ear. The oaks take the wind like an instrument and return it as breath. And then there's the water. It holds the sky and breaks it over and over. If you sit on the low wall and really watch, the reflections make their own decisions. The faces in bronze are calm. The water is not. It edits what it sees. The first time I went, I realised how thin the path is between curiosity and dread. 1 step is research. 2 steps are traditional. A 3rd step, and now you're part of the story, whether you mean to be or not. I stood across from the pond and reread the plaque to hear something ordinary. The museum's floodlights painted the trunks of the oaks a pale grey, then left slices of true black between them. My phone clock changed minutes I couldn't feel. Somewhere, a duck whispered to itself like a person thinking out loud, and then the air changed temperature by a handful of degrees. It was summer. It shouldn't have. People say the statues move if you watch. They don't lurch. They don't step. That would be easy to notice, easy to dismiss. What they do, if they do, is more ambiguous. A tilt at the edge of sight. A fraction of a turn that only makes sense once you tell yourself it happened. The centre figure seemed to lean, barely, towards the water. I thought I'd imagined it. The pond broke her into lines. The lines rearranged themselves. When the wind paused, the lines continued to move as if the pond knew of another wind while the air didn't. I told myself not to blink. I blinked anyway. There's laughter in this legend. That's a common report. Soft at first, like someone telling a secret to themselves. Then closer, without footsteps. Then gone. I heard something like it. Not cheer, not joy. More the dry hinge of a gate in a house no one lives in. It came from my left. I turned right. And then the old dare surfaced in my mind. The one with the car and the headlights and the thin cruelty of teenagers trying to terrify one another. The road they used is closed now. You can't sit in the dark and wait with your foot ready on the brake. You have to walk. Which is worse, because walking makes you responsible for how close you get. Closer, then, the statues tower when you stand beneath them. Bronze is kind to moonlight. It gives back just enough, strength in the middle, wisdom to one side. Fertility, on the other hand, is calm, maternal, untroubled. I thought about the names locals gave them, the ones we don't put on plaques. I thought of the other names the story tries to remember, but never can. It's easier to touch bronze than mist. It's harder to argue with metal than rumour. You could leave it there, a little theatre of nerves. But the domain insists on adding details at the pace of a heartbeat. A sudden hush, a crack in a branch where there is no breeze. Footsteps that aren't footsteps, the steady metronome of your own pulse released into the open air. And something else. So small I almost didn't believe it. The smell of iron. Not strong, not definite. The suggestion of it, around the place where the grass dips to meet the water, where dark would have been deepest if a lantern had ever been used. It is ordinary to be frightened in a park at night. It is not a supernatural achievement, but tell that to the human animal whose instincts wake up when the trees crowd in. Tell that to someone who grew up hearing the clean, unpleasant word for what ropes do. There's a story I was told by a man who swore he didn't believe in any of this. He said that in the early 90s, he and his mates drove down there because they were bored, and because being scared felt cheaper than petrol. They parked near the water, left the engine ticking, switched off the lights. Their breath fogged the inside of the windscreen in long, tired waves. Nothing happened for a while. Then the middle statue. He refuses to change this part when he tells it the middle one dipped just a little, and he knew it was the wind. He knew the car shifted on its suspension. He knew someone was going to laugh in a second. But he unlocked the doors with a shout that didn't sound like his own voice. Everybody laughed anyway, as relief, big, unwise laughter. And underneath that laughter, very close to the glass, something else laughed back once. Just once. It had been waiting for them to behave like boys before it bothered to answer. There's another story, newer. Two friends walking in from the museum late, choosing the path by the oaks because it felt honest. They reached the pond, and one of them said her grandmother had told her the tale, as if it were an ordinary warning. Eat, sleep, don't stand too long where the land holds a grudge. They waited for nothing to happen. slid into a conversation about work, money, and a neighbour's odd hours. Then one of them noticed her sleeve was damp. Not wet, not soaked, but as if something had touched it with water and withdrawn. The air around them was dry. The bench was dry. The sleeve stayed cold the rest of the walk, a patch the size of a hand. I can provide explanations for each of these things. You can too. Bronze convinces. Water plays tricks. Trees move in ways that seem to conceal their motion. Human memory is a compulsive editor, trimming what doesn't fit the story it wants to tell. But stories are not honest, only when they provide facts. They are sincere when they reveal what we want, or what we fear, or what we cannot let go of. Auckland Domain isn't empty land. Before the city shaped it, before the lawns, before cricket and weddings, and the summer smell of cut grass, it was swamp and bush, part of a volcanic landscape that remembers pressure more easily than peace. Names lived here first, names that still do, and what those names mean is older than the word Auckland. You don't need a ghost for a place to possess a mood. You need topography, weather, and human expectation. Give those three enough time together, and they'll make a presence whether you want one or not. Still, the number 3 returns like a tide. 3 figures in bronze. 3 shadows people swear they saw. 3 ropes in the legend. None of us can verify, and too many of us can picture. It's a tidy number. The brain likes it. We tell jokes in 3s. We light candles in 3s. We imagine fate as a trio because 1 feels lonely and 2 feel like a choice. 3 feels inevitable. The legend learned this early and never forgot. There's a tenderness in how some people tell the story now. The witches aren't villains anymore, if they ever were. They're guardians, custodians. They're not here to punish anyone. They're here because a place remembered them, even when history did not. It's a kinder way to hold a dark thing. But kindness doesn't blunt fear, not here. If anything, it deepens it, because guardians can be disappointed. Custodians can be weary. If you stand by the pond long enough, you might feel watched in a way that isn't predatory. Watched the way a teacher watches a class when someone is copying answers they haven't earned. We should say this carefully and not forget it. Māori healing is not witchcraft. The old word settlers, used for what they feared, does not belong to Rongwa. To mix them up without thought is to repeat an old harm. When modern tellers imagine the 3 as Wahine who were punished for knowledge, they're not writing a new indictment. They're rescuing a story from an old cage. The ghost tale stays, because ghost tales are stubborn. The interpretation shifts toward respect. Even so, the execution myth has teeth, and you can feel them when the wind moves as if a rope were in it. I promised myself I'd be honest with you about what happened when I went back. It was a weeknight, and late, the kind of late that excludes dog walkers and couples arguing softly. I took the long route down, past the empty cricket ground and the low lamps the city forgets to maintain. The pond was a dull coin between the trees. I stopped far enough away to claim caution, and close enough to call it bravery if I needed to later. The bronze looked black. The reflections weren't reflections anymore, more like the idea of a reflection, rough and changing, refusing to settle. At first, nothing. That was the worst part. Silence that felt practiced. A stillness that wasn't peace so much as rehearsal. Then a slight sound from the water's edge, exactly where the grass dips. A low creak, wood entirely absent from the view, followed by the sensation of something passing behind me without bending air or grass or light. My skin reacted before my mind did. The hair on my arms behaved as if touched. I turned slowly, because a quick movement felt like permission to whatever was about to be dramatic. Nothing. And then, after the nothing, the slightest movement in the middle figure's neck, the suggestion of a nod, not toward me, but toward the water, as if listening to something in it speak and answer. Fear edits time. I don't know how long I stood. I see the cold grew precise, as if it preferred the right side of my face. I know that when a sound came, laughter, once very near, I didn't run. I couldn't move at all. It wasn't cruel, that sound. It was, and I can't improve this, patient. As if whatever made it had measured 100 nights and chosen the second I would remember most. What I felt next is the part I'm still not comfortable with. It was not a presence the way we usually mean it. It was subtraction, as if the land removed something that usually stands between you and where you are. No filter, no buffer. The bowl of the domain, the pond, and the black seams between tree trunks were complete and straightforward. And in that completeness, it was terribly easy to imagine three shapes that didn't belong in the day. Not translucent, not rotting, not cinematic at all. Just three tall, still silhouettes under branches that have learned the weight of sway. There's a mundane sequel to this. A pair of runners appeared at the far end of the path, headlamps bouncing, breath loud. The world resumed its ordinary argument with itself. I found I could move again. When I reached the museum steps, I looked back, the way you do when you want to test whether a place will oblige you with a trick. The pond offered me the coin of itself, bright and flat. The statues looked like themselves. I thought of going back down. I didn't. What makes a story like this endure? Practical answers come quickly. It's a map for a particular kind of night, the one when friends are bored and courage needs calibrating. It's a link between generations, where older siblings terrify younger ones. Parents pretend not to know what their kids are planning, and then tell them they did the same at their age. It belongs to that small set of city rights that feel transgressive without breaking anything the city cares to fix. But that's not the whole of it. The deeper reason is stranger and simpler. Some places gather a charge. Not magic, attention. The domain is a basin for it. Weddings and protests and kisses and breakups and cricket and lonely lunches and breathless runs and slow grief and every quiet thought anyone ever had, sitting on that wall, looking at bronze and water, attention pools. If you visited at night with no particular purpose in mind, you might still feel it. If you arrive with a legend ready in your teeth, the place will meet you halfway. It's not that ghosts are guaranteed, it's that you are. So, the three remain. Maybe not as the executioner of a history that never wrote them down. Maybe not as witches under anyone's definition that would pass an exam. Maybe as a pattern the city found and fed. Maybe as a warning the land keeps repeating until we learn how to listen without putting a rope in the sentence. Or maybe, and here's the quiet terror that kept me awake, maybe there really are three. Perhaps the number is not ours, but theirs. Maybe the statue didn't borrow the legend. Maybe the legend borrowed the statue to mark a place where something ended badly and refuses to end entirely. If you go, and you will, now that you've listened this far, don't go for proof. Go for the feeling. Walk instead of driving. Take the long path. Let the small sounds be themselves. A duck is a duck, a branch is a branch, until something in the night decides to disagree. Notice where the cold prefers to live. Count to 3, because you will, even if you don't mean to. Stand at the pond and keep your hands at your sides. If laughter comes, don't answer it. If you smell iron, don't breathe too deeply. If you see movement, let it be the water, unless the bronze refuses to cooperate. And if you hear a whisper, If you feel a word without sound form right behind your ear, remember this. Legends aren't only about the past, they're about behaviour. Theirs and ours. Theirs, if they're still here at all, is steady, patient, amused, tired perhaps. Ours is less reliable. We go for the dare, we go for the story, we go to be changed, and hope the change is small enough to keep. But change is not polite. It doesn't ask. On the walk home, I tried to name what I believed. Facts are clean. They remain what they are when the sun rises. But something else had moved through me by the pond, a kind of agreement I hadn't meant to sign. It didn't matter that I could compose the sensible version in the morning. The night had written its own. And here is the line that bothers me most, the one I can't explain away, even to myself. If there truly were 3 healers, witches and women punished because fear has a reason, I am not sure the land would tell us the truth. Not because it lies, but because it remembers the wrong that was done more clearly than the names of who it was done to. Memory can be loyal and unhelpful at the same time. So, I'll leave you with a question to carry, the kind that presses a thumbprint into your thoughts when you reach the edge of sleep. When a place offers you a story that is not quite true and not quite false, and you feel it anyway, what, exactly, is it that you're believing? You've been listening to Pacific Shadows. Sleep well if you can.